The night was calm, the stars were bright, and the wind moved slowly across the open farmland. The farmer sat on his porch with a cup of warm coffee, listening to the crickets in the grass. For him, it was just another night, another quiet evening in the middle of nowhere. But then he noticed something strange in the sky. At first it looked like shooting stars. But these lights did not fall. They did not vanish. Instead, they grew brighter, moving slowly, almost carefully, as if watching the land below. The farmer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, because he knew the stars never behaved like that. The lights came closer, and soon he could see shapes behind the glow. Dark shadows of ships, silent and heavy, moving lower and lower. They made no sound, no roar of engines, only a hum that rattled his bones. The farmer felt his chest tighten. This was not a storm. This was not an airplane. This was something else. The ships hovered above his crops, above the golden fields he had planted with his own hands. Machines unfolded from their sides, long arms stretching down like claws. They released beams of light that touched the soil, and the crops responded. Stalks of corn shivered, wheat bent low, as if pulled by an invisible hand. The farmer's heart sank as he realized the truth. "They're taking it," he whispered to himself, his voice thin in the night air. "They're taking my harvest." The machines pulled the crops upward, tearing them out of the ground without care, loading them into strange containers glowing with energy. The land groaned under the weight of their theft. The farmer clenched his fists. Every seed he had planted, every hour under the sun, every drop of sweat was being stolen. He stood up, his coffee forgotten, his chair rocking back, and his eyes locked on the ships. They were huge, far beyond anything human. Yet they moved as if no danger waited for them here. They moved as if they owned the land already. The farmer's dog barked, running into the field, growling at the strange lights, but the beams ignored the animal. They were focused only on the crops. The dog barked louder, but the farmer called it back, because he felt something worse than theft. He felt disrespect. These strangers, whoever they were, thought the land was empty. They thought the farmer was nobody. They thought humans were too weak, too small, too unimportant to resist, and that thought burned inside him stronger than any fire. The ships worked quickly, field after field glowing, crops vanishing into the alien holds. The farmer watched, but he was no coward. He had seen storms destroy barns. He had seen droughts burn the soil. He had buried loved ones with his own hands. He knew pain, and he knew how to fight for what mattered. He whispered to the earth under his boots, "They don't know this land. They don't know me." The night grew colder, and the farmer walked back inside his house. He opened a wooden cabinet, and from it he pulled out an old shotgun, rusty but strong. He checked the shells, his hand steady though his heart thundered. Outside, the lights painted the horizon, alien shadows crawling across his home. He stepped outside again, the weapon in his hands, his dog at his side. The ships were still there, and the machines were still pulling. The farmer took one long breath, his eyes hard as stone, because he understood something the aliens did not. A farm is not just land, it is a life. It is a bond between soil and blood. It is not a treasure to be stolen. It is a heart that fights back when threatened. And this farmer was ready to fight. The aliens did not notice him. Or maybe they noticed and did not care. Their great machines continued their harvest, silent, endless, cold. To them it was only food, only resources. But to the farmer it was everything. He raised his shotgun not yet to fire but to promise, to himself and to the land, that he would not let this pass. The stars above seemed to tremble. The hum of alien engines filled the night, and the farmer stood alone in the dark. But he did not feel fear. He felt anger, he felt defiance, and in that moment, under the glow of stolen crops, with shadows of ships hanging heavy in the sky, the farmer understood the truth. They came for food thinking humans would not resist, but they were wrong, terribly wrong. The night had changed, the earth had changed, and soon the invaders would learn. This land was not empty, and its keeper was ready. The night after the silent ships arrived, the land was no longer the same. The farmer had seen his crops stolen, his fields torn open by strange machines, and his soul carried a fire that would not rest. He sat in his kitchen, the dim lantern light flickering against the old wooden walls, his shotgun leaning by the door. His dog curled at his feet, but sleep did not come to him, not that night. He kept hearing the hum of those alien engines in his head, kept seeing the beams pulling his wheat and corn, all the hard work of the season gone in moments. His father's words echoed in his mind, words spoken long ago. A farmer's land is his life. Never let anyone take it without a fight. Those words now burned hotter than ever. At dawn, the farmer stepped outside, the sky pale and cold, the field scarred with strange marks from the machines, the soil broken but the land still alive. He breathed in the smell of dirt, strong and real. And he made a decision. If those creatures came again, they would not find him weak. They would not find him unprepared. He walked to his barn. The doors creaking open, inside lay tools, machines and memories, old tractors with rust on their wheels, barrels of fuel stacked in the corner, spools of barbed wire, coils of rope, all the simple weapons of a farmer's life. He touched the tractor, his hand steady, his mind racing. This land had taught him how to work, and now it would teach him how to fight. The farmer began his work. He dug shallow pits at the edge of the fields, covering them with loose soil and wooden planks, traps for anything that might move on the ground. He strung barbed wire between fence posts, sharp and hidden in the grass. He set fuel cans near the irrigation ditches, planning to turn water into fire when the time came. Every step was careful. Every choice was part of a plan only he could see. The sun climbed higher, but the farmer did not stop. His shirt soaked with sweat. His hands blistered, yet he kept working, his dog following close, watching him with sharp eyes, as if the animal too understood that this was not a normal day. This was a day of war. By noon, the traps were ready, the barn had been cleared, and his old shotgun was cleaned. He stood in the field looking at his work, and he nodded once, quiet but firm. For he was not a soldier, but he was something older, something stronger. He was a man who knew the land, and the land would fight with him. As the sun fell, the sky changed again. The farmer's heart grew tight, for he saw it. The glow on the horizon, the same silent lights returning, the ships lowering like predators, the beams of energy stretching once more into his soil. They had come back, greedy and sure of their power. But this time the farmer was waiting. The aliens sent smaller machines first, drones with silver shells that floated above the crops. Scanning the land, they looked harmless, almost like insects. But the farmer saw the weapons hidden beneath their bodies, glowing faintly, ready to strike. He crouched behind his fence, his dog at his side, and whispered, "Stay low." His finger tight on the shotgun, the drone passed overhead, its light sweeping the ground. But the trap was set. As it lowered to inspect the soil, its metal arm caught the barbed wire hidden in the grass. The machine jolted, sparks flashing before it crashed into the pit, torn apart by its own weight. The farmer breathed hard, but his lips curved into a grim smile. One down, more to come. The other drones hovered closer, searching for the source of the failure, their lights brighter, their hum sharper. But the farmer was already moving. He pulled the fuel can's rope. Fire erupted in the ditch. Flames raced along the dry grass, catching one drone in its blaze. The machine shrieked in metal agony before falling. The aliens inside the great ships surely saw this. They must have laughed at first. A single man with fire and wire standing against them. But that laughter faded when their machines fell, when their harvest was no longer easy. The farmer stepped into the open, shotgun raised, his shadow long against the burning light. He fired. The sound echoed across the fields, pellets tearing into the nearest drone, sending it tumbling into the dirt. He reloaded quickly, every movement sharp, practiced, steady. In the silence that followed, the farmer spoke aloud, not to the ships, not even to the sky, but to the land itself. "They think I'm weak. They think I'll bow down, but this land is mine, and I will not give it away." His words carried in the night, his voice strong even though he stood alone, even though the ships above were bigger than anything he could imagine. His defiance was a weapon sharper than steel. From the ships, new lights formed, stronger beams, perhaps more drones, perhaps something worse. But the farmer did not flinch. He had made his stand. His traps were ready, his land was armed, and his spirit was unbroken. The night grew darker, the hum louder, and the farmer knew this was only the beginning. The war had started, and it would be fought not by soldiers in distant cities, but here, in the dirt, in the fields, in the heart of a simple farmer who refused to surrender. And as the ships moved closer, the farmer whispered to his dog, to his soil, to the stars above, "Let them come. They will learn the wrath of the land." The sky above the farm glowed with pale light. The great ships still hung like shadows of doom, but now they were restless. The farmer's resistance had broken their calm, and the invaders wanted to remind him who ruled the night. The farmer stood at the edge of his field, the smoke of burning grass still curling behind him. The traps he had set already claimed the first machines, yet he knew this was not the end, it was only the beginning. His shotgun rested in his hands. Heavy but steady, his eyes sharp as stone, The ships released more drones, dozens this time, sleek and silver, buzzing like angry hornets, their lights sweeping the ground, their hum echoing through the soil. They circled above the fields, scanning, hunting, searching for the man who dared to fight them. The farmer crouched behind a broken fence. His dog low at his side, he whispered softly, "Stay close. Don't make a sound." The dog growled deep in its chest but obeyed, both of them staring as the swarm moved closer. The first drone swept too low, its beam brushing over the ditch, and the farmer acted. He pulled the rope tied to the fuel can. A spark ignited, flames roared upward. Fire leaping into the sky, the drone burst in the blaze, its body falling in burning fragments into the field. The other drones screeched in response, their hum turning sharper, red lights flickering under their shells. They had discovered the enemy, and now they would strike. One drone darted forward, firing a pulse of energy. It smashed into the wooden fence where the farmer had crouched seconds before, splinters flying into the air. But the farmer rolled aside, shotgun raised, he fired. The blast tore into the drone's belly, sparks and wires spilling out. It dropped hard into the dirt, twitching before going still. Another drone swooped down fast, its arms unfolding, blades glowing like fire. The dog leapt first, teeth snapping at the machine, dragging it low. The farmer swung his shovel like an axe, smashing the drone into the ground, its hum fading into silence. The swarm was not done, more came rushing. Beams of red energy cutting across the fields, tearing into the soil, scorching the crops. But the farmer had lived with storms. He had lived with fire and drought. He did not run, he moved with the land, ducking behind hay bales, slipping into irrigation ditches, letting the drones chase him into the traps he had set. One pit claimed two at once, their metal bodies falling into the hidden hole, their thrusters choking in dirt. The farmer threw a lantern onto the oil-soaked grass. Flames burst again, and the drones inside shrieked until they burned out. Every shot he fired echoed through the night. Every trap sprung made the earth shake. The farmer fought with a rhythm, not wild, not desperate, but steady, patient, as if the land itself guided his hands. The ships above paused, watching, their beams dimming for a moment, perhaps in confusion, perhaps in disbelief. A single man, a single farm standing against their swarm. It was not supposed to be this way. The farmer felt his chest burning with each breath, his arms sore from recoil, but his spirit grew stronger with every fallen machine. He shouted into the night, his voice carrying across the fire-lit fields. "This is my land, not yours. You will not take it." The words were not just noise. They were a promise, a warning, and the invaders heard it, because for the first time they hesitated. The last drone came down fast. Faster than the others, it was larger, heavier, its weapons glowing bright. It fired a blast that shook the ground, throwing the farmer off his feet, dirt and sparks raining down. His shotgun clattered to the ground. The dog barked fiercely, running at the machine. But the farmer shouted, "No," his hand grabbing a length of barbed wire lying nearby. With all his strength, he flung it across the drone as it swooped low. The wire tangled in its arms, the blades jammed, sparks flew. The machine spun wildly, crashing into the barn wall, exploding in a storm of metal. The night fell quiet. The fire crackled. The hum was gone. The drones were broken, scattered like toys across the soil. The farmer lay in the dirt, his chest heaving. But his eyes sharp, he rose slowly, gripping his shotgun again. Looking up at the silent ships for the first time, the invaders had tasted resistance. For the first time, they had seen fear, not from the human, but from themselves. The farmer wiped the sweat from his brow, the flames dancing in his eyes, and he whispered to the land, "We are not weak, we never were." Above, the ships shifted, their lights brighter, their shadows heavier, as if deciding the next move. The farmer knew they would not stop. He knew the real battle was still ahead, but he had struck the first blow and it had landed deep. And as the dawn began to touch the edge of the sky, the farmer stood among wreckage and fire, one man against the stars, and the stars had learned to fear him. The night had ended, but the farmer's war had only begun. The wrecks of broken drones still smoked in the soil, their twisted metal shining under the first touch of morning sun, yet the sky above was not empty. The great ships remained, silent and cold, watching from the clouds. The farmer stood in the middle of his ruined field, shotgun in hand, his body tired but his spirit fierce. He knew the invaders would not retreat. Not after losing their machines. They would come back stronger, heavier, and they would come soon. The land around him whispered with the wind, carrying the smell of fire and earth, reminding him that this fight was not only his, it was the land's fight too. He went to work again, his hands blistered, his muscles sore. But he wasted no time. He knew the only way to face what was coming was to use everything the farm had to offer. The barn held barrels of fuel. The sheds held ropes and chains. The fields held water lines and pumps. And the animals themselves were restless, sensing the storm that hung above. The farmer opened the gates of the cattle pen. The herd stirred nervously, their eyes wide, their bodies tense. He whispered softly to them, "Run when you must. But run where I guide you." He was not only preparing weapons of steel and fire, he was preparing weapons of chaos. He rerouted the irrigation lines, turning water to flood the ditches and soften the ground, making mud that could trap heavy machines. He laid barrels of fuel near the fences, connecting them with hidden fuses so that when the moment came, the field would burn like the heart of a furnace. He stacked hay bales high to form cover, places to hide, to strike, to vanish again. By the time the sun climbed high, the farm was no longer just a farm. It was a fortress not built of walls or towers, but built of soil, wood, water, and fire. Every corner a trap, every shadow a weapon, and at its heart stood the farmer, calm but unyielding. The hum returned in the afternoon, deeper, heavier, shaking the ground beneath his boots. The ships were lowering again, closer than before, and this time they did not send only drones. This time they sent machines that walked, tall and cruel like steel giants with glowing arms, each step crushing the earth, each movement unnatural. The farmer's dog growled low, the cattle shifted in fear. But the farmer did not step back. He whispered to himself, "This is our land. They will not leave it alive." The first walker machine crossed into the field, its feet sinking slightly into the softened soil. The farmer smiled grimly. The trap was working. It took another step, heavier, and then its legs sank deep into the mud. The machine tilted, struggling to free itself, and that was when the farmer lit the fuse. The barrels near the fence ignited. Fire raced along the grass, surrounding the trapped machine in a storm of flame. Its metal groaned, its glow flickered, and then it collapsed into the burning ditch, the ground swallowing it whole. The other walkers advanced, their weapons firing beams of red energy, burning hay bales, scorching the earth. But the farmer moved like a shadow, ducking, rolling, firing his shotgun when he could, striking with tools when he must. A pitchfork through a cable, an axe into a joint, every blow turning their strength into weakness. The cattle panicked, charging through the field, but the farmer had guided them toward the enemy. The herd smashed into another walker, horns and hooves striking metal. The machine staggered, and the farmer threw another fuel can. The explosion tore through its chest, sparks flying as it collapsed with a scream of steel. The sky thundered as the ships lowered further, beams cutting into the soil, trying to clear the traps, trying to burn the resistance away. But the farmer was relentless. He opened another line of irrigation. Water flooded the burning ground, turning fire to steam, thick and choking. Blinding the machines, the land itself turned into smoke and shadow. Through the fog, the farmer moved unseen, striking from behind, vanishing again, his dog darting with him fast and fierce. The invaders were built for power, for crushing, but they were not built for stubbornness, for cleverness, for a man who knew every inch of soil beneath their feet. One by one, the machines fell. Caught in mud, burned by fire, blinded by smoke, broken by tools too simple for the invaders to respect, but deadly in the right hands, the farmer's hands. The land roared with the sounds of battle, animals crying, fire raging, metal tearing, and in the middle of it all stood the farmer, his face blackened with soot, his eyes burning like the flames he had set, every breath a vow, every strike a promise. When the last walker fell, crashing into the mud, the field was a wasteland of smoke and wreckage. The soil torn, the crops gone, but the land had spoken. The wrath of the earth had been unleashed, and the invaders had tasted its fury. The ships above remained, their lights flickering, their hum restless, as if confused, as if angered, but also as if afraid. The farmer stood tall, leaning on his shotgun, his dog at his side, the fire reflecting in his eyes. He shouted to the sky, his voice raw and fierce. "You thought we would kneel. You thought we would bow. But this land is not yours, and it never will be." The echo of his words carried through the smoke, carried into the sky, and for the first time the invaders realized the truth. The farmer was not just a man, he was the land itself, and the land had risen in wrath. The field was smoke and ash. Broken machines lay scattered like bones. The farmer stood in the wreckage with his dog at his side, his body tired but his eyes fierce. Above him the ship still hung heavy, silent, watching. And though he had won this round, he knew it was not the end. The land was scarred. The crops burned, the barn broken, but the farmer felt no regret. Better to see his land ruined in battle than stolen in silence. Yet as he leaned on his shotgun, he realized something. He could not fight forever alone. The invaders would not stop. They would send more, stronger, larger, until either the land fell or they did. The farmer walked to the old radio in his house. Dust covering its surface, wires frayed with age, but it still worked. He turned the dial, static filled the air, then he spoke. His voice calm but sharp. They are here. They are stealing our land. I have fought, but I will need you. All of you. His words traveled across the empty countryside, bouncing between towns and farms. And though no one answered at first, he knew they had heard. Hours passed, the sun lowering again, and then headlights appeared at the edge of the dusty road. One truck, then another. Then more, farmers stepping out, their boots heavy with dirt, their hands rough from years of labor. Some carried rifles, some carried tools, others carried nothing but will. But all of them came, because the land was theirs too. They gathered in the yard, their faces hard, their eyes filled with the same fire that burned in the farmer's chest. One man spoke, his voice low. We heard you on the radio. Thought maybe you lost your mind, but then we saw the sky. We saw those ships and we knew you were telling the truth. Another woman stepped forward, a shotgun slung over her shoulder. You stood alone last night, but tonight you will not stand alone. The farmer nodded once, his throat tight with emotion, not of fear but of pride. This is our land, and we will fight for it. The night grew dark, and together they worked, turning the farm into a battlefield not for one man but for many. They drove tractors into position. Mounting makeshift barricades, they filled jars with fuel. They stretched wire across the fields, every farmer adding their strength, their knowledge, their courage. The land became alive with human hands. Every corner turned into defense, every shadow turned into cover. The old farmer watched as neighbors hammered. Tied, dug, and built, he realized that what he had begun had grown. It was no longer one farm against the stars. It was many, united by the soil under their boots. At midnight, the sky lit again, brighter than before. The ships opened their hulls and new machines descended. Heavier, darker, crawling with weapons. They were prepared this time, prepared for resistance. The farmers stood ready, rifles loaded, torches burning, tractors humming like iron beasts. The old farmer stepped to the front, his dog beside him, and he raised his shotgun to the sky. Let them come, he said, his voice steady. They will find more than one man waiting. The machines touched the ground, towering walkers and swarms of drones, their lights sharp and cruel, their weapons glowing, and the invasion pressed forward with full force. The first wave of drones rushed low, but the farmers fired as one, the night exploding with gunfire, pellets and bullets tearing into metal, sparks flying, drones crashing into dirt. The walkers advanced, their beams cutting across the fields, but the tractors roared to life, farmers driving straight at the machines, iron wheels churning the soil, steel plows smashing into armored legs. One tractor caught fire but kept rolling until it rammed into a walker, both bursting in a storm of flame. The air was chaos, fire, smoke, metal, and voices, the farmers shouting to each other, passing signals, covering flanks, each man and woman fighting not just for themselves but for their neighbors, their families, their land. The old farmer moved through the fight with steady steps, firing, reloading, swinging tools like weapons, his traps springing, fire chasing machines into mud, cattle stampeding once again into the fray. He had turned his farm into a weapon, but now it was more, it was an army. The invaders hesitated, their machines struggling not just against one clever farmer, but against many stubborn hearts, each human small but together unbreakable. The great ships above flickered with light as if uncertain, as if calculating because the harvest they had expected had turned into war. One neighbor shouted through the smoke, "They thought we were weak, but they were wrong." Another fired his rifle and added, "This land is not for them," their voices carried. Rising above the battle, the machines fought hard, beams cutting, explosions ripping through soil, but every time one farmer fell, two more rose. Every time a machine advanced, it found another trap, another fire, another human standing in its way. The old farmer looked at the sky, fire glowing in his eyes, his chest heaving with effort, and he whispered, "We are not soldiers, but we are stronger than they know." The ships roared above, their engines shaking the night, as if frustrated, as if challenged, but they had learned something. They had expected a harvest, they had found wrath, and as the smoke rolled across the land and the stars vanished behind the fire, The battle grew louder, fiercer, deadlier. The war for the soil had become a war for survival, and the universe itself was watching. As farmers rose together, and the land itself rose with them, the night was fire and thunder, the farm a battlefield of smoke and ash. The farmers had stood together and driven back wave after wave, yet the ships above had not left. Their shadows hung heavier now, and deep inside them the invaders prepared something worse. The old farmer knew it, he could feel it in the ground. The soil seemed to tremble as if warning him. The dog at his side barked once and then fell silent, ears flat, eyes sharp. The farmers around him caught their breath, waiting, knowing that the next strike would not be small. It would be the storm, and then it came. The ships opened wide, and from their bellies poured not just drones, not just walkers, but entire carriers of machines, a rolling camp of steel, heavy engines grinding the earth, claws digging deep as they built their own base right in the heart of the stolen field. The sky turned red with their glow. The soil screamed as if wounded. The farmers watched, their rifles shaking in their hands, their hearts pounding. For this was no raid now, this was invasion. The aliens were planting their own roots in human soil, claiming the land as theirs. And if the humans did not stop it now, they never would. The old farmer clenched his jaw, his knuckles white on his shotgun, and he spoke loud enough for all to hear. They want to make this their ground, then we will show them it already belongs to us. The others nodded, their eyes burning with the same fire. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwilled. And in that moment the farmer laid out the plan. His voice steady, his mind clear. We strike the camp before it grows. We use the fog, the night, the smoke. We cut their power lines. We burn their fuel. We blind their machines. They think they are strong, but they do not know how to fight where the land itself fights with us. The farmers scattered into the night, moving low, carrying torches, ropes, axes, jars of fuel, even old scythes. Tools of the field turned into weapons of war. The tractors rolled slow and quiet. Engines muffled, headlights off, like iron beasts crawling through the dark. The invaders did not see them coming. They were busy building, their machines hammering, drilling, their lights blazing bright, proud, certain, until the first fire burst into the sky. A fuel barrel, rolled into the base by two farmers, exploded with a roar, flames racing along the ground. Licking at alien machines, the camp shook. Alarms screeched, drones lifted, but it was too late. The humans were inside. The old farmer led the charge, his shotgun blasting into the nearest drone. His dog darting through the chaos, biting at wires, pulling at cables. The neighbors fought beside him, rifles cracking, torches thrown into fuel tanks. The base turned to chaos. A walker machine turned to fire on them, its beam glowing red. But the fog from the irrigation ditches rolled in thick, hiding the humans, blinding the machine. It fired wild, cutting down its own camp. The farmers laughed bitter and hard, using the land's cover to strike again. One farmer swung an axe into a power cable, sparks flying as the machines flickered. Another drove his tractor straight into a storage pod, smashing it open, seeds and stolen crops spilling into the mud. Stolen food returned to the earth. The battle raged, but the invaders were shaken, their order broken, their machines confused. They had numbers, they had weapons, but the farmers had the ground, the shadows, and the stubborn will of people who refused to bow. The old farmer moved like a ghost, firing, vanishing, striking again. Every trap he had set before now turned against the enemy. Barbed wire catching their legs, pits swallowing their drones, fire chasing them from their own machines. He was not just fighting. He was teaching them, teaching that this soil would never be theirs. At the center of the chaos stood the largest machine yet, a towering beast with cannons glowing, its steps shaking the earth. It turned its weapons toward the farmers, ready to burn them all, but the old farmer saw it, and he saw what had to be done. He climbed onto his tractor, the engine growling, the wheels biting into the mud. He drove straight toward the giant, fire and smoke all around him, bullets and beams slicing the air. But he did not stop. He pushed harder, faster, shouting with every breath, "This land is ours, not yours." The tractor smashed into the giant's legs, fuel cans strapped to its sides igniting. The explosion roared like thunder. The machine staggered, its cannons flickering, and then it fell, collapsing into the mud with a scream of metal, the shockwave rattling the ground for miles. The camp fell into silence, the remaining machines pulling back, the ships above dimming their lights, the invaders retreating from their own broken camp, the soil smoking, the fire still burning, but the humans still standing. The farmers gathered, their faces blackened with soot, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, but their eyes alive. They had struck at the heart of the invaders, and they had won not by power but by unity, by will, by the bond between man and land. The old farmer stood among them, his dog leaning against his leg, his shotgun still in his hand, and he said, "We showed them the truth. They may come again, but they will never forget tonight. They will never forget the land that fought back." The farmers looked to the sky, where the ship still hovered, silent and unsure, and they knew the battle was not over. But something had changed, something deep. The invaders had come for crops, and they had found war. The turning point had come, and it was not the end. It was the beginning of a fight that would echo across the stars. The battlefield was silent now, the smoke drifting slowly into the pale morning sky. The fire had burned low, leaving black scars across the soil. Twisted machines lay half buried in mud, broken arms reaching toward nothing. The earth smelled of ash and iron, but also of victory. The old farmer stood in the middle of it all, his shotgun heavy in his hands, his dog beside him, both covered in dirt and soot, yet both alive. His chest rose and fell with slow breaths, his eyes scanning the field that had once been his crops, now a graveyard of machines. Around him the other farmers gathered, their trucks dented, their clothes torn, their faces streaked with sweat and smoke, but their eyes were bright. They were tired, battered, but proud. They had fought and they had won. They had shown the invaders that the land was not for the taking. One farmer kicked the broken shell of a drone and spat. "They thought we were weak." Another shook his head. "They thought we would bow." A woman lifted her rifle and whispered, "But they learned we do not bow." Their voices were low but steady, a chorus of defiance rising from the ashes. The old farmer walked to the ruins of his barn, the walls still smoldering, the roof gone. He placed a hand on the blackened wood, his heart heavy. This was his home, his work, his life, now scarred, but as he looked at it, he did not see defeat. He saw survival. He saw proof that even when fire and steel rained from the sky, the land could endure. He turned to his neighbors, his voice calm but strong. "We stood together and we held the line. They will remember this. They will fear this place, and if they return, they will find us ready." The farmers nodded, their faces hard because they knew he was right. The ships above had not vanished. They still hovered at the edge of the clouds, silent, watching as if uncertain, as if weighing the cost of another strike. But they did not descend. They did not fire, they only lingered. And then slowly, one by one, they began to rise, fading into the sky, disappearing into the endless dark. The dog barked once, sharp and fierce. As the last ship vanished, the sound echoed across the fields, a declaration that the land was free. For now the farmers spread out, walking the ruins, pulling survivors from the wreckage, tending to wounds, sharing water, binding cuts with cloth torn from their shirts. They worked as they had always worked, side by side, their strength not only in their hands but in their unity. Children peeked from truck beds, eyes wide with both fear and pride. They had seen their parents stand against giants. They had seen that courage was not just a word, but a fire that burned in the human heart, and that fire had carried them through. The old farmer stood at the highest point of his land, the hill where the soil was black but solid. He looked across the horizon, and for the first time since the ships had arrived, he allowed himself a long breath of peace. The morning sun touched his face, warm and steady, and he whispered to himself, "The land still lives." But deep in his chest he knew this was not the end. The invaders had lost, but they would not forget. They had come for food, for harvest, for what they thought was weak soil, and they had found wrath instead. They would carry that memory back into the stars, and others would hear of it. Perhaps they would return, perhaps more would come, stronger, angrier. But if they did, they would not find fear here. They would find the same soil, the same stubborn hearts, the same hands that turned fields into weapons. They would find humans waiting. The neighbors began to leave, their trucks rolling slowly down the dusty road, engines rumbling, each driver honking once as they passed, a promise that they would return if called, a promise that this fight had bound them together forever. The old farmer watched them go, his dog leaning against his leg, his fields quiet once more, though ruined, though scarred. They were still his, and he whispered to the soil, "You are not alone, not while we walk on you." As the sun rose higher, the farm looked broken, but in the broken earth, new life would come. Seeds would be planted again, crops would rise again, because that was what humans did. They endured, they rebuilt, they turned even ashes into growth. The old farmer lifted his shotgun one last time, pointing it toward the sky, not as a weapon now, but as a message. This land is ours, always ours. He lowered it slowly, a faint smile on his lips, not of joy, but of quiet victory. And somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond the stars, the invaders would remember. They would tell others of the place where they had come for crops and found war, where they had expected silence and found wrath, where they had thought to steal from farmers and discovered warriors instead. The farm would heal, the people would heal, the land would endure, but the story of that night, the story of resistance, would echo far beyond the soil. It would echo into the universe, a warning, a truth, a promise, that humanity was not weak, humanity was not prey, humanity was the land itself, and when the land was threatened, it fought back. And so the farmer stood in the quiet of the morning, scarred but unbroken, his dog at his side, his soil beneath his boots, his neighbors in his heart, and above him the empty sky. And in that silence, the universe itself seemed to whisper the lesson. Never steal from those who live by the land. Never forget the wrath of farmers.